recovered from your travels to join me this evening in some research. I shall await you at 8 of the clock at St. Paul's Church, and we shall sample London's most authentic taste of the Americas. Bring your appetite and coin purse, as the night market has markedly improved in your absence. Yours as ever, Helena Higgins. Penelope glanced across the street at the vendors hawking their wares and food by the light of the gas lamps. The usual assortment of unaccompanied young men and ladies her own age milled around the purveyors who had set up on the street, those who couldn't afford stalls inside the columns of the market building. Hats, umbrellas or hooded capes shielded most of the patrons from the worst of the rain as they bought goods and food from the roaming hawkers. Unlike Penelope, they had come prepared for the weather. None of them looked particularly like Helena, however. Penelope stuffed the letter back into her pocket and her hands back into her fur-lined muff. With the rain, many of the vendors now had a captive audience, as ladies and gentlemen emerged from the theatres, only to huddle under whichever awnings and porticos they could. A party of 3 stopped next to Penelope and blinked at the rain. The girl, who looked to be a year or 2 younger than Penelope's 10 and 7, huffed. "Oh, it's too tiresome. Can't you get us a cab, Frederick?" She turned to the young man next to her. Judging by their similar looks, Penelope guessed him to be the girl's brother. "I'll get juiced wet out there," he exclaimed, in a way young men reserve for sisters who irritate them. Then he seemed to remember a stranger stood nearby, for he inclined his head to Penelope. "I beg your pardon, miss." "I must apologise for my son," said the third of the party, a middle-aged woman with a tall feather protruding from her coiffure. "He is a heathen, I'm afraid." Penelope nodded at the lady. Quite all right. She'd hardly call the young man a heathen for using the word deuced in her presence, but the woman couldn't know that Penelope had heard far worse language in her travels. "The weather shows no sign of abating, I fear." "Freddie, get this lady a hackney as well." Penelope shook her head. "I thank you, but I'm meeting someone." The older woman frowned. "Here? At this time of night?" Penelope gestured at the carts in the street and at the sheltered stalls beyond, inside the market building. Steam from the food the vendors were cooking dissipated into the dank evening air as a multiplicity of scents wafted toward Penelope. "A school friend invited me to join her here at the stalls for some culinary research. It seems this is one of the few places in London where one can find an authentic taste of the Americas." Though Penelope rather thought she'd be the judge of that. "The Americas?" the woman repeated, as though the thought of anyone seeking out food from the continents across the ocean had never occurred to anybody in the whole history of human relations. "Are you a culinarian, then?" the young man asked Penelope, as he swiped a piece of damp hair away from his dark blue eyes. She nodded. "I soon will be. I'm in my final term at the Royal Academy. My sister dabbled a bit, but decided to go to the Royal Conservatory of Commoditas and Design in the end," he said, with a gesture at the young woman. "I never dabbled, Freddie. My design improvements to Lady Hammersley's chaise and four had her bragging to her neighbours for weeks. If anything, you're the dabbler." Freddie's sister wrinkled her nose. "Well," said he, with a rueful smile, "perhaps I am, but I make a dashed fine pheasant pie." He tipped his tall hat to Penelope, murmured something to his mother about going to look for a cab, and bounded off into the rain. As he stepped off the curb, he collided with a bedraggled young man in a shapeless brown coat, carrying a wooden tray covered in cloth. Penelope winced as 2 half-moon-shaped pies fell from the tray and blocked onto the dirty, wet cobbles. "Watch yourself, why don't ya?" the young man said, throwing a glare at Freddie. "I beg your pardon," Freddie said. He touched his hat and hurried down the street. "Two pasties trod in the mud," the boy yelled at Freddie's back,